Hi, I'm Calder, and at my own brother's wedding, they didn't just forget to save me a seat. They made a joke out of my entire life. In front of hundreds of people, my father said I wasn't even theirs. No warning, no shame, just laughter. They erased me that night. But what hurt more was realizing they'd been rewriting my story long before that moment. The lies, the silence, and now that I've finally spoken up, why are they trying so hard to shut me down? Have you ever been pushed out by your own family? Let me show you what happened next. Tap like if you've ever felt like the outsider, and subscribe if you're ready for the rest of the truth. I slid the keys into the ignition, and for the first time in 20 years, I didn't wait for someone to stop me. The air conditioning wheezed weakly as I pulled out of the country club lot, headlights slicing through a haze of pollen and twilight. Behind me, the wedding was still raging. Strings of fairy lights shimmered in my rearview mirror like distant stars I'd never get close to. I wasn't crying, not yet. I drove in silence, jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. My fingers trembled against the steering wheel as Harlan's voice echoed through my head. The one we picked up, literally, off someone else's porch. He said it with a laugh, like it was a charming family anecdote, like it didn't blow a hole straight through my chest in front of 200 wedding guests. The car's low fuel light blinked on. Of course it did. I pulled into a rundown gas station on the edge of town, the kind where the flickering sign buzzed louder than the pump itself. I didn't bother going inside. I needed to sit. I needed to breathe. My phone buzzed. Mom. I let it ring out. Again, then again. Another call, this time from Mira. Are you seriously doing this right now? Her voicemail snapped. This is Ren's big night. Don't make it about you. I scoffed out loud. About me? I sat back, letting my head fall against the seat. The memory of the reception returned like a kick to the ribs, everyone clapping when Harlan toasted Ren, Delora's beaming smile as if nothing had happened. No one said a word when he dropped the truth like a punchline. Not one person stood up for me, not even Mira, especially not Mira. She was always so polished, so poised, the golden child who never spilled a drink or said the wrong thing. But she'd known, hadn't she? The sideways glances, the nervous laughter. She'd been in on it. I turned off the ignition. The silence inside the car felt louder than any music at that party. Was I even really surprised? I thought back to last Thanksgiving. I'd spent the entire day in the kitchen while everyone else played board games and watched football. When I finally sat down to eat, my plate was already cold. No one noticed. Or they noticed and just didn't care. I was always the helper, the fixer, the can you grab that and watch the kids while we take a quick drive girl. Not a daughter, not a sister, just available. I remembered the time I got a flat tire on the way home from my second job, and no one picked up when I called. Ren called back 3 days later, not to ask if I was okay, but to tell me he'd proposed to his girlfriend and needed help finding a photographer. Yeah, this wasn't new. The wedding had just put a spotlight on what I'd been trying to deny for years. I wasn't family. Not to them. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Lisa. Hey, sorry about earlier, but you know Dad's just like that. He doesn't mean anything by it. That line sent a different kind of heat up my spine. The dismissive shrug every family uses to excuse the worst behavior. That's just how he is. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. I didn't owe them a response. I didn't owe them anything. For 20 years, I'd bent myself into whatever shape they needed, canceled vacations, skipped birthdays, lent money I never saw again. I held babies, cooked meals, and cleaned up messes that weren't mine. And still, they made sure there was no seat for me at the table. The night had grown darker, the heat giving way to a cooler breeze. I cracked the window and stared up at the moon, full and bright, like it had the nerve to shine down on a night like this. What now? The thought barely formed before an old memory surfaced. Something Grandma Evie once told me, years ago, just before she passed. You don't have to earn your place, Cal. Not in a real family. Real love doesn't come with conditions. At the time, I thought she was just being sweet. Now I wondered if she was the only one who ever saw what was happening. I started the car again. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but I knew it wouldn't be back to that house. not tonight. Maybe not ever. A green highway sign flickered in the distance, northbound. Maybe it was time I finally followed that road trip I always dreamed of, the one I kept pushing back because someone needed me for something. Maybe it was time I stopped being needed and started being known. As I merged onto the freeway, the wedding music faded completely behind me. I adjusted the rearview mirror, not to check traffic, but to look at myself. Still here, still breathing, still me. Whatever they thought, whatever they believed about where I came from, I'd decide where I went next. And this time, I wouldn't ask for directions. By the time the dashboard clock blinked past 11:42 p.m., I was somewhere on the northwest side of the city, the party long behind me. I didn't know where I was headed. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not the house I grew up in. Not tonight. Not after what he said. And not after how they all let it slide like it was nothing but a harmless joke at my expense. The roads were nearly empty. Yellow streetlights pulsed over the hood of my truck, every flicker pressing against my thoughts. The windshield reflected my face, tight-lipped, wide-eyed, and unfamiliar. I looked like someone who had nothing left to give, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of that. I pulled into a Shell station near Fredericksburg Road, one of those 24-hour stops where the lights are too bright and the silence too loud. I parked under a buzzing lamp and just sat. My hands rested on the wheel, motionless. My thoughts swirled like oil slick on water, confused, bitter, then suddenly still. What was I, if not their helper? If not the fallback plan, the stand-in parent, the errand girl, the one who always showed up even when I wasn't invited? A vibration broke the stillness. I didn't even look at the screen. I just stared as the name blinked up. Mom. The buzzing stopped, then started again. This time I answered. I don't know why. Maybe some piece of me still hoped she'd say something real. Sweetheart, her voice came through, sugary and rushed. Can you come back to the venue? Mira's stressing out. We need someone to take the kids back to the hotel. Silence filled the cab of my truck. You know how hectic these things get, she added, chuckling softly, like nothing had happened. You've always been so good with the little ones. I didn't say a word. And it's getting late. You were always the one who could settle them down when they got cranky. That was it. No apology. No mention of what Harlan had said in front of everyone. Not even a question about whether I was okay. Just a request, for convenience. She hung up before I could respond. Not that I had anything to say. There was nothing left to say. My mother wasn't calling to comfort me. She was calling because someone needed to do the thankless job, and I'd always been the one too polite or too desperate to say no. I leaned back in the seat, head tilted toward the ceiling. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Not yet. Then another notification lit up the phone. It was a text from Lisa. It looked like it was meant for the family group thread. If she doesn't come back by tomorrow, I'll just get someone else. We can't afford drama right now. I stared at it, rereading every word. My name wasn't even there, just she, like I wasn't a person, just a problem to be solved, or better yet, replaced. They didn't think I'd see it. They didn't care if I did. I set the phone down in my lap and let out a slow, shaking breath. That message did something the toast hadn't managed. It shut off the switch in my brain that had always made excuses for them. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe they're just joking. No, they meant it. Every word, every silence, every side glance, they all meant it. I started replaying every time I'd stepped in. Every wedding I helped plan, every birthday party I catered, every debt I quietly paid off when someone couldn't cover rent or utilities. Mira crying in my arms during her second divorce while I held her baby. Lisa asking for rides to appointments, help with her taxes, with her mortgage paperwork. Not once did they thank me. Not really. It was always assumed. Calder can handle it. Calder's got time. Calder doesn't mind. They didn't see me. They saw a service. I rubbed at my temples, a dull ache spreading behind my eyes. My apartment wasn't far. When I got there, I tossed the keys onto the kitchen counter and headed straight for the small hallway closet. I pulled out my old duffel bag, faded green, still smelling faintly of the cedar blocks I'd thrown in years ago. I didn't think. I just started grabbing what I needed: 2 pairs of jeans, a stack of folded t-shirts, my worn boots, socks, underthings. My fingers moved with purpose. It was like my body had already decided, and the rest of me was just catching up. From a shelf overhead, I took down a battered envelope, the one where I kept tip money and leftover paychecks I hadn't deposited, just in case. I never knew what the case would be, but now I did. In my bedroom, I paused. On the dresser sat an old photo in a tarnished silver frame. Me at 16, braces and all, standing between Harlan and Delora. I was holding a certificate from school, some honor roll thing I barely remembered. What I did remember was how their hands weren't on my shoulders. They stood beside me like I was a neighbor's kid who'd done something mildly impressive. I lifted the frame and looked closely at their faces. Harlan was already halfway turned toward Mira, who stood just outside the crop. Delora's smile was too tight, too polite. I put the photo face down on the dresser and turned away. Back in the living room, I grabbed my phone and opened a blank message thread with Leora. My thumbs hovered for a moment, then typed, "I'm okay, don't look for me, I just need a break." I hit send. Then I searched for outbound buses. There was one leaving from the downtown station at 5:15 a.m., heading northwest. I didn't know exactly where I'd land, but that didn't matter anymore, as long as it wasn't home. The bus pulled out of the station while the sky was still a deep charcoal gray, the world half asleep around me. I didn't bother asking the driver when we'd arrive. I didn't care. I just knew I needed to be somewhere else, anywhere else. Somewhere the shadows didn't know my name. I took a window seat near the back, the kind you choose when you don't want to make small talk or be seen. I curled into my jacket and leaned against the cold glass, watching San Antonio shrink behind me in flickers of neon and silence. I didn't look at my phone. I powered it off and stuffed it into the bottom of my bag. If anyone wanted me, they'd have to wait. The hum of the wheels against the highway gave my thoughts just enough space to unravel. I don't think I slept, but I drifted, somewhere between exhausted and empty. I watched other passengers board at different stops: college kids, night shift workers, a woman with a toddler who wouldn't stop crying. None of them looked at me, and for once, that was exactly what I wanted. A street sign passed in a blur, something about Oregon. I didn't even register the town name, and that's when it started. That memory I thought I'd buried too deep to matter. 4 years ago, winter. I was in the garage, digging through bins for the Christmas lights. It was freezing. I remember because my breath came out in little clouds and my fingers were numb even through my gloves. Harlan had asked me to be useful and find the green and gold light strings, the ones Mira liked. Of course, I'd opened the wrong box. There it was, a plain manila envelope, thin but heavy in meaning. No label, no markings. I should have put it back right then, but I opened it. Inside, a stack of paperwork. My name printed on the top sheet. Adoption records, legal signatures, a date that didn't match my birthday. I remembered standing there for a full minute, eyes locked on the paper as my ears rang. And then Delora's voice, coming from behind me. "You find the lights yet?" I'd shoved the envelope back into the box, closed the lid, and never mentioned it again. That moment had sat inside me like a rock, too heavy to carry, too terrifying to throw away. Until now. I blinked back to the present. The bus had stopped at a small-town gas station. People were stretching their legs, buying warm sodas and peanut butter crackers. I stayed in my seat. No appetite, just the taste of betrayal on the back of my tongue. They knew. Harlan, Delora, Lisa, maybe even Ren and Mira. They knew and they chose silence. No wonder they looked through me all these years. I wasn't one of them. Not really. Another memory surfaced, slower this time. Softer. Grandma Evie. In her final days. The last person who treated me like I mattered beyond utility. I remembered sitting at her bedside, her hand resting over mine, papery but warm. She'd looked at me, eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them, and said, "You've got a quiet strength in you. Not like them. That's not bad, Calder, just different." At the time, I thought she meant I was more introverted, more measured. maybe a little old-fashioned. But now I wondered if she'd known, if she'd wanted to tell me the truth without betraying the ones who raised me. And maybe that was her way of giving me a warning, or a blessing. She passed 2 days after that. I never forgot how she looked at me, like I was mine, not theirs. The bus rolled on. The sky began to lighten. A soft lavender glow stretched over the hills. I pulled a tattered notebook from my bag and started scribbling. I didn't know what I was writing, but the words came anyway. I don't belong to them, and maybe that's a gift. The pen paused. My hand was steady. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. I closed the notebook and leaned back. The window was fogged now, but through it, I saw the outline of trees, dense, dark, and unfamiliar. Then a sign appeared in green, peeling paint. "Welcome to Oregon." I sat up straighter, as if the seatbelt had just loosened. My pulse didn't race. It slowed. Something uncoiled inside me. A name I hadn't answered to in years, Calder, echoed in my head, and for once it sounded like someone worth knowing. I didn't have a plan, not a map, not a job, not a friend within 300 miles. But I had breath, I had space, and I had no one waiting for me to carry their mess. I pressed my hand to the cool window and smiled, just barely. It didn't feel like I'd run away. It felt like I'd finally arrived. The wind off the coast hit me like truth. I hadn't escaped them. I'd finally found me. But even as my boots touched the wet pavement of Astoria, a quiet fog clinging to the rooftops like secrets that never lifted, I knew I hadn't walked into some fairy tale of reinvention. This wasn't a rebirth. It was survival in a new skin. The town looked like something out of an old postcard. Shingles darkened by rain, storefronts with peeling paint, fishing boats bobbing on gray waves in the distance. It didn't promise anything except solitude, and that was enough. I rented a room above a bar that smelled like whiskey, fried shrimp, and too many regrets. The floor creaked under every step, and the radiator groaned like it had opinions, but it was mine. No family photos, no expectations, just 4 walls, a window, and silence that didn't ask questions. I found work by accident. The cafe was tucked into the corner of a sloped intersection, small, worn, the kind of place locals return to not because the coffee was extraordinary, but because the owner remembered how you liked it. Era was blunt, wiry, and stared at me for exactly 3 seconds before saying, "You work clean?" I nodded. "You start tomorrow." And that was it. No background check, no reference calls, no, "What brings you to town?" She handed me an apron like it was a pact, and I took it with both hands. For the first time in my adult life, I was just me, not Harlan's daughter, not Lisa's sister, not the family errand runner. No one here knew the name Calder came from a grandmother who whispered truths in hospice while my mother avoided the room. It felt strange and steady all at once. The first week passed in a blur of dish soap, burnt toast, and weather complaints from regulars. I worked the early shifts, sweeping behind the counters before the sun broke through the fog. I took my breaks near the back alley, watching the gulls fight over sandwich crusts. That's when I made the mistake. One morning, sipping lukewarm coffee with aching feet, I opened my phone out of muscle memory. I tapped into the family group chat and saw nothing. No new messages, no dumb memes from Lisa, no photo dumps from Mira's kids, no Leora's midnight "Are you still up?" texts. I scrolled, confused. Then I noticed my name wasn't on the group list anymore. I hadn't been muted. I'd been removed. No warning, no explanation, just gone. My thumb hovered over the empty thread as if it might fill itself. It didn't. My screen stayed blank, the silence louder than any fight we never had. I checked my texts. Only one new message, buried under a week's worth of cafe orders and rent reminders. It was from Leora. I tried. They said it's better this way. Better for who? I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe heavy. I just sat there, letting the ache settle somewhere deep in the place where names used to mean belonging. That afternoon, while wiping tables and refilling sugar jars, I got another message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Kelsey, a girl I used to babysit with in high school. "Hey stranger, just heard from Mira that you're living in Seattle now? Congrats on the big new job." Seattle? I stared at the text, feeling something sharp twist in my gut. That's what they were telling people? That I'd gotten a job? That I was too busy to show up for the wedding? No mention of Harlan's little performance. No mention of my name being left off the family table. No, oops, we uninvited our oldest daughter by accident. Just, she's busy. Convenient, clean, forgettable. They were rewriting my story without me. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insulting, because it was so on brand. That night, I walked 4 blocks in the drizzle to a pawn shop with faded signage and a bell that didn't ring when you opened the door. In the corner, under a cracked guitar case and a dusty lamp, sat a camera. Old, heavy, real. The guy behind the counter barely looked up when I asked about it. $50, lens works, no returns. Sold. I took it back to the cafe after hours and snapped my first photo. Just the dock, slick with rain, one lonely seagull perched on a bent post. I saved the image to the tiny memory card and renamed the file, uninvited.jpg. Something in my chest shifted. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the group chat or the lies. But it was mine. My image, my lens, my truth. I went back to my room above the bar and stared at the photo on the tiny display screen until the battery died. I wasn't busy. I was discarded. That night, I texted Leora just one line. Tell them I'm not busy, I just don't belong. Then I set the phone down, turned out the light, and let the hum of the town carry me to sleep. He didn't belong there. The moment I pushed through the cafe's glass door and saw my father sitting near the front, alone, elbows braced on the table, fingers curled around a chipped mug, I knew the fragile quiet I'd built for myself was about to snap. The sun hadn't cleared the rooftops yet, and the regulars hadn't shuffled in for their morning drip, but there he was, claiming space like he still had rights over mine. He didn't smile. Neither did I. I kept walking behind the counter like it was any other morning, like he hadn't driven across state lines just to drag me back into the orbit I'd escaped. Era looked up from the grinder. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. Her brow twitched, and that was enough for me to know she was watching, quietly ready if I needed the out. Harlan cleared his throat, deep and deliberate. "You've made your point," he said, not even pretending civility. "Now come home." I grabbed the cleaning rag and made a show of wiping down the countertop. My voice came out cool. "You don't get to summon me." "I'm not here to argue, Calder." "No," I said, eyes locking with his. "You're here to remind me what I owe you." He stood up and motioned toward the back. "We're not doing this out here." I nodded and led him to the narrow hallway near the walk-in fridge, where no one could hear unless they really tried. The air was colder back there. Or maybe that was just me. He turned, voice low and sharp. "You made a scene." I laughed, quiet, bitter. "You mean when you announced to a few hundred people that I was some stray you picked up?" He didn't flinch. "It was a joke. It was a knife." My voice didn't shake. "You've used my silence for decades. Not anymore." He scowled. "This family is falling apart without you. The kids need watching. Mira's drowning. You walking out like this. It's selfish." "No," I said. "It's self-preservation." He stared at me for a long second, and for the first time in my life, I think he saw that I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't the helper anymore. Not the unpaid nanny, the on-call fixer, the scapegoat for everyone else's messes. "You'll regret this," he said finally, jaw tightening. "No," I said again. "I won't." I stepped around him and walked back to the front, my spine straight, breath steady. Era handed me a new pot of coffee. No words, just a nod. The kind of respect that doesn't need noise. Harlan didn't follow. He sat for 5 more minutes, finished his bitter coffee, and left without looking back. I didn't watch him go. The rest of the shift moved like a slow exhale. Every dish I cleared, every cup I rinsed felt like I was washing off decades of someone else's entitlement. I wasn't lighthearted, but I was lighter. That evening, I climbed the narrow stairs to my room above the bar, shoulders aching from more than just work. The moment I reached the landing, I saw it. A padded envelope tucked against the doorframe. No name, no return address. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Inside, I found a photo. Mira's daughter, 5 years old, in a red jumper and glitter shoes, clutching a teddy bear I'd given her last Christmas. Her smile was lopsided, innocent, unaware of the games her mother played. Beneath the photo, a handwritten note. "She asked for you today. I told her you were tired. We're tired too, Calder. Come back and fix this." Not a word about what had happened. No apology, just emotional bait wrapped in baby teeth and childhood guilt. Fix this. Like I broke it. I sat on the bed, the photo trembling in my hand, not from weakness, but from something deeper. I studied the note until the words blurred. Then I flipped the photo over and wrote one word in capital letters. No. I placed it back in the envelope and slid it under the bed, behind a stack of old notebooks. I didn't need to send it. I just needed to say it. To someone. To myself. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was whole. Later that night, I pulled out my camera and walked down to the dock. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting streaks of burnt orange across the water. The tide lapped at the pylons, slow and steady. I snapped a photo of the empty pier. No people, no distractions, just the way the sky folded into the sea. I titled it, "I Don't Owe You My Peace." Then I uploaded it. Not to spite anyone, not to start a war, but because it was true. My photo, the one of the dock glowing under the orange hush of sunset, wasn't supposed to go anywhere beyond a handful of friends. But in less than 24 hours, strangers were commenting things like, "This is how I felt when my dad left," or "I wish I had her courage." Some called it haunting, others called it healing. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but maybe silence was just another way they'd trained me to disappear. So when Oren, a retired photography teacher who ran weekend classes out of the community center, emailed me, I almost didn't open it. The subject line read, "Your voice deserves walls." Inside, he invited me to show my work at a local exhibit the following weekend. No theme, no resume needed, just the truth. I said yes, not for attention, not for revenge, for oxygen. I called the series Framed Out, a title that wrapped every unsaid thing I'd swallowed my entire life. I printed 5 photographs, each one its own wound. The first, a dimly lit dining room, a table set for 6 with one empty chair. No caption, just silence. The second, a silhouette of a woman standing outside a house window while figures inside danced under string lights. You couldn't see her face, but you could feel the ache in her posture. The third was a close-up of an old photo. Me, age 9. Someone had accidentally scratched across my face years ago, but no one bothered to replace the print. That felt honest now. I left it that way. The other 2 images were recent. One of a hand mid-reach toward a doorknob, hesitating. The last was my favorite, a pair of boots at the edge of the sea, unmoving, defiant. Opening night was modest, folding chairs, paper cups of wine, local folks who knew too much about each other to be impressed. But when people reached my wall, they didn't just glance and move on. They lingered. A woman whispered, "This one. This is what my mom did to me." A teenage boy with chipped nails stared at the blurred childhood photo and whispered to his friend, "That's how it felt when they left." And I stood near the corner, quiet, clutching my camera bag like a shield, feeling seen for the first time not by the people who raised me, but by those who had survived their own erasure. The next morning, a local blog reposted one of my pieces under the headline, "The Forgotten Daughter." And that's when it shifted. The messages began, not just likes or shares, but emails, DMs, letters from people I didn't know. "Thank you for showing this. You gave me a voice. My family pretended I didn't exist after I came out. You made me feel less alone." It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying. But peace never lasts long in my world. 2 days later, I saw them again. Harlan and a man in a navy suit sitting in a parked car outside the cafe. Harlan's arms crossed tight over his chest, the other man's eyes scanning the storefront. I didn't go outside. Era caught my stare and raised a brow. I shook my head once, slow. If they ask for me, I'm not here. They didn't come in. They just waited. When they finally pulled off, Era handed me an envelope they'd left behind. "No note," she said. But the other guy gave me his card, said you'd know what to do. Inside, legal paperwork, a declaration form. If I signed it, I would be voluntarily giving up any and all claim to family inheritance or property. Retroactively. No lawyer listed on my end, just a line for my signature, and the phrase, "to avoid future familial dispute." So this was their next move. They weren't just writing me out of the story, they were trying to burn the page I'd been written on. I took the envelope upstairs that night, set it on the small desk beneath the window. I didn't touch it for a while, just stared. Then I took out my camera. I photographed the letter, no edits, no filters, just the paper, stark and quiet. I uploaded it with a caption, "If I never belonged, why are they still trying to make it official?" I left it up for 5 minutes. That was long enough. It had already been seen, already saved, already passed along like a flare in the dark. Then I deleted it. Some things aren't meant to live forever online, but some truths don't disappear just because you click a button. I sat in front of the mirror after that, legs folded, face bare. I looked older, not tired, defined, my jaw tighter, my gaze steadier. They were done pretending I was family. Good. Because I was done pretending I needed them to be whole. I reached for my camera again, its strap worn soft from days spent reclaiming fragments of myself. "If they can't define me," I whispered, "then I'll show them who I really am." The first message hit my inbox before sunrise. "Is this you?" it read, followed by a blurry video thumbnail. I didn't recognize the name, just a profile photo of a sunset and a user handle I'd never seen. I hesitated before clicking, and then the screen loaded. There I was, outside the cafe, locked in a tense, bitter standoff with Harlan. The angle was crooked, probably shot through the cracked blinds of the storage window. My voice echoed too clearly for comfort. "You just pretended I mattered, until I didn't." That line sliced through the air like a blade. It was me, but not the me I had ever wanted people to meet first. The video was posted in a local community Facebook group, Coastal Watchers Astoria area. The caption read, "Local woman berates her elderly father after he drives hours to reconcile." The comments split like a wound. Some were sympathy wrapped in smugness. "She sounds ungrateful." "He just wanted to talk. What kind of daughter speaks like that?" You can hear the entitlement dripping off her voice. Others, thankfully, saw more than the surface. "Y'all don't know what went down before this clip. She doesn't owe him forgiveness just because he's older." But no matter which side they landed on, they all had something to say. And my name was now pinned to a public wall like a dartboard. Era didn't bring it up the next morning. Neither did Oren. But the way they looked at me, gentler, slower, it said enough. At noon, while restocking oat milk, Oren came around the corner and asked, "You okay?" I wanted to say yes, but I wasn't sure anymore how to be okay and visible at the same time. I nodded. Getting there. After work, I sat on the back steps of the building, trying to breathe through the noise in my phone. I scrolled without absorbing, watching my name tagged again and again. Then a voicemail blinked onto my screen. It was Aunt Janelle. Her voice carried its usual syrupy sweetness, laced with just enough judgment to curdle it. "Hey, sweetheart, I know you've got a lot going on, but I was surprised you didn't RSVP to Mira's wedding. Everyone thought you were coming. Mira said you must have just decided not to. Hope you're well." I froze. I never received an invitation, not by email, not by mail, not even a text. I pulled up my inbox and searched every term I could think of. Mira, wedding, invitation, RSVP, nothing. Not one word. They hadn't forgotten. They'd erased the invitation completely, so when I didn't show, it looked like a choice, like abandonment. They didn't just set me up to be excluded that day. They planned the story that would explain it away. And everyone believed it. The rage came slow, like coals under skin. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat still. Then I opened a blank folder on my laptop and named it Erased, Remembered. Inside it, I dropped photos I'd taken but never shared. One of an empty wedding table, one chair pulled slightly out, another of a handwritten RSVP card I found at a thrift store once, left unsigned, A third of a mirror cracked clean through the middle, catching only the sky. Each one was quiet, but they screamed in my head. I almost hit publish on a post with the screenshots, the voicemail transcript, the invitation search results. I wanted to burn the lies down with proof, but I paused. I closed the tab. Instead, I kept building the gallery. They had used their version of the truth to paint me ungrateful, angry, difficult. I wouldn't scream louder than them. I would frame the silence they left behind and let that speak instead. The next morning, I uploaded just one image from the folder. A wedding banquet hall with a long white closed table, candles lit, plates full, and one chair, my chair, missing from the end. The caption? I never declined. I was never invited. I wasn't missing. You erased me. That chair wasn't empty by accident. It was a message, and I was done pretending I hadn't received it. After everything, the lies, the gaslighting, the edited memories, I realized there was only one thing left to say. So I said it in the only language they couldn't rewrite. I uploaded the photo set at midnight. No captions on the images themselves, just a single post. #forgotten daughter, I was always there. You just looked past me. There was no plan. I didn't expect a wave. I just needed it out of me. But by morning, it had already started. Notifications poured in before I'd even had my first cup of coffee. Strangers from all corners of the country shared the post. Some added their own stories. Others just commented hearts, fire emojis, or variations of this, all of this. By noon, a local reporter requested a quick interview. Your piece hits, she said over the phone. It's not about anger, it's about being invisible. That's what's getting people. It wasn't fame. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. A strange, full-bodied kind of quiet that hummed under my skin. Then Mira texted, so now the world knows you're angry. Happy now? Mom's embarrassed. Dad's furious. Please stop this. I stared at the screen, heart thumping. Not from sadness, but from the gall. She still didn't get it. The second message hit harder. Forwarded message. Family dinner, Saturday, no cameras, just come. Just come. Like the past year hadn't been a war zone. Like I was the one who'd left a seat empty and never looked back. Like they hadn't scrubbed me from every group photo and told relatives I was off chasing work. They wanted peace, sure, but only on their terms. No apologies, no truth, just a new performance. I typed a response. I'm not angry, I'm just done pretending we were ever something we weren't. I didn't send it. Instead, I walked down to the shoreline. The sea was choppy, slate gray, crashing like a slow fury. I let it drown out the second guessing. Let it hush the parts of me that still wanted their approval. I didn't go to the dinner. Saturday evening passed like any other. I worked the late shift at the cafe. Era gave me a slice of peach pie to take home. I ate it standing by the open window of my room, the breeze cutting through my thoughts. Later that night, a friend from high school sent me a screenshot. Mira had posted a group photo of the dinner. The caption was just, so good to be together. I counted faces. 12. One chair was visibly empty, mine. The top comment was blunt, where's your daughter? Mira deleted the post within minutes, but not before hundreds of people saw it. I didn't comment. I didn't repost it. I just closed the app, deleted my account entirely, and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, there was no ache behind my ribs, no itch to explain myself. I printed one photo, the same one from the exhibit. The dinner table, a single chair pushed slightly out. I framed it, wrote a caption on the mat board. I was never missing. You just never looked. Then I sealed it in brown wrapping paper and mailed it to my parents' house. No return address, no note. Let them decide what to do with it. Let them feel whatever silence I'd left behind. Link to next chapter. That should have been the end, but someone else wasn't ready to let go. The letter arrived late afternoon, slipped beneath the door like it had been delivered by a ghost. The envelope was soft, off-white, handwritten in Leora's round, hesitant scrawl. My name, just Calder. No last name, no address, just me. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter while I made a cup of tea, wiped down the kitchen sink, rearranged the same 3 books on my shelf. When I finally slid my finger beneath the seal, I knew before reading the first line that it wasn't another guilt trap, Another manipulation cloaked in nostalgia. It was small, folded twice, and said only this: "They pretend it's easier not to mention you, but I remember you every day, and I don't want that to feel wrong anymore." There was no "come back," no "we miss you," no checklist of what I'd done wrong, just honesty. And it undid me in the quietest way. I sat on the edge of the bed, rereading it until the corners went soft from my hands. That night, the gallery was full of quiet voices and slow steps. The final exhibition, a blend of photos from my Forgotten Daughter series and new work from the coast. Fishing boats half sunk in fog, empty swings, wind-bent trees. Each image carried a whisper of absence. I stood off to the side, letting people drift past, pretending I wasn't scanning the room for someone I didn't even know I was hoping to see. Near the end of the night, a woman appeared. Tall, silver-streaked hair pulled into a precise knot, thin hands folded at her waist. She stared at the photo titled "Inheritance," a girl standing outside a lit house in the rain. She didn't touch her phone. She didn't take a brochure, just stood and looked. When I approached her, she turned, met my eyes for a split second, then walked out before I could say a word. The gallery assistant came over and said, "She told me she knew your mother. Said there were things she should have said a long time ago." I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. Whatever secrets she carried weren't mine to unlock. But it meant something. Knowing someone else had seen, had wondered, maybe had wanted to say something all those years ago, and hadn't. Back home, my apartment still rattled from the bass thumping through the bar below, but I didn't mind anymore. I'd learned to live with the noise, inside and out. I had clients now. My photography was online. I hosted a weekly art circle for teens who didn't fit in the neat boxes their parents had drawn. We painted, we talked, and sometimes we just existed without explanation. I didn't chase healing anymore. I built it. One rainy afternoon, I opened the box I'd been avoiding. Inside, the adoption papers, the half-burned photo, Leora's note. I held them, not to ache, but to choose what I wanted to carry forward. I took the adoption paper out back behind the building, set it inside a terracotta pot, and struck a match. The flame was small, clean. It curled the edges like a slow exhale, then turned everything to ash. That wasn't denial. It was release. Later, I sat by the window. The harbor blinked back at me with amber lights and rippling water. In the distance, gulls coasted low, skimming the edges of everything. People would always say I walked away, but the truth was simpler. I just stopped standing still. Sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is walk away from the version of family that breaks us and build a life where we finally feel whole. Calder's journey wasn't about revenge or recognition. It was about reclaiming the pieces of herself that were buried under silence, guilt, and roles she never chose. She didn't win by being louder. She won by being honest, with herself, and with the world. And maybe that's the real message here. You don't have to go back to where you weren't loved just because it's where you came from. So let me ask you, have you ever felt erased by your own family? Or pressured to keep peace at the cost of your own voice? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's open up this space for those stories that often go unheard. And if Calder's story resonated with you, even just a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, real-life-inspired stories every week. Because here, your voice finally gets to matter.